Captain Kaelan Voss stood on the edge of the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon of the Zaldari moon below. The vast wilderness stretched out in front of him, jagged cliffs, dense forests, and swirling dust storms. The perfect training ground. He could feel the familiar sting of doubt settle in his chest. Humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Defense Force hadn't come easily. Many species still saw humans as little more than children playing at war. The Zaldari were the worst of all. "You're weak, human," Gorrak-Khan had said to him earlier that day, his deep, mocking voice booming through the training hall. The Zaldari warrior's words had cut deeper than any blade. The truth was, Kaelan had heard that before. But it didn't make it any easier. Every time he faced a superior alien, be it in the training halls or in discussions about strategy, he felt that simmering resentment of being seen as inferior. It gnawed at him, but he wouldn't let it show. Not today. Today, he would prove Gorrak and every other alien who underestimated humanity wrong. The door behind him slid open, and a voice broke through his thoughts. "You all right, Captain?" It was Lieutenant Rhea, his second-in-command and the only human officer he trusted implicitly. She stepped into the room, her eyes narrowing as she studied his face. Kaelan turned, offering a tight smile. "Just thinking." Rhea leaned against the wall, her arms folded. "About Gorrak?" He nodded, his jaw clenching. "He doesn't get it. He thinks we're weak, that humans can't handle what this galaxy demands. That we're just cannon fodder for his race." Rhea's expression softened. "You've got this, Kaelan. You've always got this. Just remember, you don't need to prove anything to him." "I do," Kaelan replied, his voice hardening. "I have to. We all do." She gave him a knowing look. "You can't carry the weight of the entire human race on your shoulders. You'll burn out trying." "I'm not going to burn out. I'm going to show them what humanity can do." He turned back toward the window, the swirling dust clouds on the Zaldari moon offering a dark reflection of his thoughts. Rhea sighed, her gaze following his. "Just don't do something reckless, okay? I need you here." Kaelan's lips quirked into a brief smile. "Don't worry. I've got this. I'll show him we're not weak." The training grounds were a spectacle. The Zaldari weren't known for their hospitality, and the cold, barren landscape matched their reputation. The air crackled with tension as soldiers from all species gathered to observe the competition. At the center of the arena stood Gorrak-Khan, his towering form a massive block of muscle and scales, his arrogance radiating off him like a force field. The alien warriors who stood with him were known for their ruthless training techniques, ones that pushed physical limits to the point of near death. Kaelan was no stranger to pain, but the thought of facing Gorrak in his element was a different kind of fear. The Zaldari warrior looked at him now with disdain, his yellow eyes narrowing as he spoke, his voice a low growl that echoed across the stadium. "So, human. You think you can survive the Zaldari trials?" His words dripped with mockery. Kaelan stepped forward, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. The soldiers around them fell silent. "I'll survive," Kaelan said coolly, his voice carrying across the stadium, unwavering. "And I'll do more than that. I'll win." Gorrak chuckled, crossing his arms. "Win? Against me?" He pointed a clawed finger at Kaelan's chest. "Your bones are brittle, human. You won't last 10 minutes. Kaelan's muscles tensed, but he didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered. "We'll see." The training began with a challenge of endurance, facing the planet's wild terrain, enduring a series of physical obstacles designed to break a soldier's body. The arena was filled with walls of razor-sharp rocks, treacherous sand dunes, and swarms of indigenous creatures. Kaelan knew this was more than just about physical strength. It was about grit, tactics, and resilience, the kind of strength humans had shown time and time again throughout their history. It was their willpower that kept them alive, not just their bodies. The first obstacle was a massive wall of jagged rock, towering above them like a prison. Gorrak, with his unnatural agility, scaled it effortlessly. His Zaldari muscles coiled like a serpent as he leaped, each motion fluid and predatory. Kaelan watched for a moment, his mind calculating. The human body wasn't designed to scale walls like that, but he knew how to make the terrain work for him. He approached the wall with calculated steps, feeling his heart race as he leaped upwards. His fingertips brushed the rocks, finding small crevices and grips. His body screamed in protest as his muscles strained, but Kaelan powered through the pain. It wasn't about the quickest way up, it was about the methodical approach, the ability to endure. By the time Kaelan reached the top, Gorrak was already on his way to the second obstacle, his back to Kaelan's progress. The human soldier grinned. He wasn't going to let this alien think for 1 second that he was weak. But Gorrak wasn't done with him yet. As Kaelan descended toward the next stage, Gorrak shot him a look that could burn through steel. "I'll break you, human. You'll regret this challenge." Kaelan didn't respond, instead focusing his attention on the next obstacle, a field of deadly, clawed creatures. They were waiting, their red eyes fixed on him as their sharp teeth gleamed in the dim light. Kaelan didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, ducking and dodging with calculated precision, using the environment to his advantage. The creatures snapped at him, but Kaelan was faster. Each move was deliberate, every step in rhythm with the pulse of the arena. He was gaining ground. He was showing them that humanity was capable of more than brute force. As Kaelan crossed the final hurdle, he could see Gorrak struggling with his own set of beasts. The Zaldari warrior was having trouble keeping up. His arrogance was beginning to crack. Kaelan's heart pounded as he crossed the finish line, his body sore and bruised, but his mind sharper than ever. Gorrak, still wrestling with the creatures, had failed to reach the end. For the first time, Kaelan allowed himself a breath. Maybe today, humanity would show the galaxy what they were really made of. "Not bad, human," Gorrak growled from the distance, his voice tight with anger. But Kaelan didn't need his approval. He had already proved his point. The next morning, Kaelan woke to the sound of combat drills echoing through the Titan's corridors. It was the usual cacophony of weapons fire, the clash of alien training regiments, and the grunt of soldiers pushing their bodies to their limits. But today felt different. Today, it would be him and Gorrak, alone, facing each other in the harshest training environment they could endure. The Zaldari warrior had been seething since their last confrontation. Gorrak's pride, as vast as his muscular frame, had been bruised. The fight had been brief, but it had spoken volumes. Gorrak couldn't stand being bested by a human. Kaelan slipped into his tactical gear, each piece of armor clicking into place with a familiar weight. He had trained for moments like this, moments when it wasn't just about surviving, but about proving something. Today was about more than physical endurance, it was a test of humanity's spirit. Stepping onto the training deck, Kaelan found Gorrak waiting for him, his massive form a silhouette against the bright lights of the arena. His yellow eyes gleamed with barely contained fury. The Zaldari warrior was ready for blood. "You're still here?" Gorrak's voice was a low growl, echoing through the massive training hall. He was already scanning the field, his focus sharp. "I expected you to crawl back to your ship after yesterday." Kaelan tightened his jaw but didn't flinch. "I told you. I'm not going anywhere." Gorrak's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Very well, human. Let's see if you can survive this trial." The challenge was set, a survival exercise in a simulated Zaldari wilderness. A deadly mix of natural terrain and hostile creatures, where no soldier, alien or human, had ever completed the course without sustaining injury. The objective was simple: navigate the entire course in under 1 hour. The rules? There were none. The only certainty was that Gorrak and Kaelan would face every obstacle the Zaldari could throw at them. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. With a sharp exhale, Kaelan sprinted into the wilderness simulation, the ground shifting beneath his feet. His mind immediately went to work, analyzing the terrain ahead. The first obstacle was a chasm, too wide to jump but too narrow to avoid. Instinctively, Kaelan dropped into a crouch, scanning the edges for a way across. Gorrak, of course, went straight into a full sprint, his arms pumping like pistons as he powered toward the chasm, his alien strength propelling him forward. Kaelan knew better than to follow his lead. The Zaldari's brute force would only get him so far in a place like this. Instead, Kaelan slid to the left, finding a narrow ledge that barely jutted out above the chasm. His muscles screamed as he crawled along it, each movement slow and deliberate. He wasn't trying to win at Gorrak's pace, he was playing his own game, relying on tactics rather than raw strength. Behind him, Gorrak leapt over the chasm with ease, landing on the other side with an arrogant grin plastered across his face. But Kaelan was already a few steps ahead, careful with every move. He made it to the far side moments later, just as the Zaldari warrior reached the next part of the course, a dense forest filled with towering trees and traps hidden under the foliage. This was where things got interesting. As they entered the forest, the air thickened. A dense fog rolled in, reducing visibility to mere feet. Kaelan's breath slowed, his mind shifting into full alert mode. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, could signal the approach of an enemy or a hidden trap. Gorrak, in his usual aggressive manner, charged forward, cutting through the fog like a wrecking ball. Kaelan moved carefully, taking in every sound, every shift in the environment. He paused at a low branch, listening. A snap. Too close. Without thinking, Kaelan dropped to the ground, rolling into the shadows just as a massive vine lashed out from the trees above. He could hear the sound of Gorrak's grunt of surprise from deeper in the forest. The Zaldari warrior had been caught by the vine, its coils wrapping around his legs like a boa constrictor. Gorrak struggled violently, but the vine tightened, dragging him to the ground. Kaelan didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, grabbing a knife from his belt. Gorrak's roars echoed through the forest as Kaelan cut through the vine, freeing the alien soldier from its grasp. "Get up," Kaelan said, his voice low. "We're not done yet." Gorrak shot him a venomous look but accepted the help, pushing himself to his feet with a furious grunt. His yellow eyes were wild now, burning with something more than anger, something darker. "You're a fool, human," he spat. "You think you've bested me?" Kaelan didn't respond. Instead, he turned his attention to the next obstacle, a series of deadly floating platforms across a river of corrosive, bubbling liquid. The platforms were small, unstable, and spaced far apart. One wrong move and the soldier would be swallowed by the river below. Gorrak made the first move, his powerful legs pushing him onto the nearest platform. But it wasn't the jumping that was difficult, it was the landing. The platforms shifted dangerously with every movement, and Kaelan's experience in balance paid off. He moved with precision, calculating each step with the focus of a seasoned soldier. Gorrak, however, was rushing again. His frustration was mounting, and it showed in his recklessness. He leapt too far, too quickly, and missed his landing. With a heavy crash, he plunged into the liquid below, thrashing wildly as the corrosive liquid ate at his armor. Kaelan waited for a moment, his eyes narrowing. He could see Gorrak struggling, but he didn't hesitate. The mission was still the priority. He stepped forward, steady as ever, using his superior tactics to stay one step ahead. When Kaelan reached the final platform, he paused for a moment, breathing deeply. Gorrak's gurgling roar echoed behind him, but Kaelan didn't turn. He had already won. The countdown clock was ticking down. As he reached the final stretch of the course, Kaelan knew this was no longer about defeating Gorrak, it was about proving something greater. The galaxy would remember today, not just because a human had beaten a Zaldari warrior, but because humanity had faced the impossible and survived. He crossed the finish line with seconds to spare, the arena falling into a stunned silence. Behind him, Gorrak finally emerged, his armor badly damaged and his pride broken. The battle had been fierce, but Kaelan had triumphed. He had shown them all what humans were capable of. Kaelan stood tall, his chest heaving as the crowd erupted into applause. The challenge was over, and for the first time, Kaelan felt something more than just survival. He felt like a winner. Gorrak, though beaten, struggled to his feet. His voice was hoarse, but there was grudging respect in his eyes. "You may have won this round, human. But this isn't over." Kaelan nodded, his voice firm but steady. It's never over. But you've learned something today. I have, Gorrak admitted. You humans aren't as weak as I thought. Kaelan didn't smile. Instead, he turned toward his crew, his focus already shifting to the next battle, one that was much bigger than either of them could imagine. Kaelan stood at the edge of the observation deck once again, watching as the stars stretched out in every direction. The vastness of space had a way of making everything feel small, even the monumental battle he had just fought. His muscles still ached, and his mind buzzed with the remnants of the competition, but the satisfaction was fleeting. It always was. Victory in the arena had been swift, but the aftermath felt strangely hollow. The Zaldari soldiers had watched the whole event in stunned silence. Some whispered, some remained motionless, but all of them had seen what had just happened. Kaelan had beaten Gorrak-Khan in front of his people, something no one had expected, least of all Gorrak himself. But that victory didn't erase the contempt he had felt every time Gorrak had looked down on him. Even now, with Gorrak nursing his injuries, Kaelan couldn't help but wonder if the fight had really proven anything at all. You look like you've seen a ghost, Rhea's voice broke his thoughts as she approached. She'd always had a knack for reading him. Kaelan turned to face her, offering a faint smile. Just thinking. About Gorrak, she asked, her eyes narrowing with a touch of concern. Yeah, he replied, his gaze drifting back to the stars. It's hard to celebrate when you don't feel like you've earned it. Rhea raised an eyebrow. You earned it, Kaelan. You've been fighting this fight for humanity since we joined the Defense Force. One victory doesn't erase everything else you've done. I don't know, he murmured. I was so focused on proving myself, on showing Gorrak that we aren't weak, that I didn't think about what it would actually mean. If Gorrak hadn't been so overconfident, if he hadn't underestimated me, maybe we would have been allies, not enemies. This wariness between us, it's exhausting. Some fights aren't about winning, Kaelan. They're about making a point. And I think you've made yours. Kaelan looked at her, his gaze softening. Yeah, but what's the point if it's just about me and him? What about all the others who still look at humans like we don't belong? You've been pushing that weight for a long time, Rhea said quietly. And I think it's time you let someone else carry some of it with you. Kaelan smiled at her, genuine, not the tight-lipped one he often wore. Maybe you're right. The next day, the ship's corridors felt quieter than usual, the hum of activity muted by the weight of the previous day's events. Kaelan was back in his quarters, his face half-lit by the soft glow of his desk terminal, reviewing mission reports. The quiet was almost too much to bear. The Zaldari had respected Kaelan's victory, but respect wasn't always enough. He had no illusions about the galaxy's view of humanity, and one victory wouldn't change that. If anything, it had only confirmed the suspicion that humans were just unpredictable enough to survive. But survival wasn't the same as being trusted. His fingers hovered over the terminal keys, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to Gorrak. The final moments in the arena, after Kaelan had crossed the finish line, had been the turning point. Gorrak, exhausted and beaten, had looked at him with a mix of anger and disbelief. But when Kaelan extended a hand to help him up, the Zaldari warrior had hesitated for just a moment before accepting the gesture. Kaelan had expected Gorrak to spit on the ground, to mock him. But Gorrak didn't. Instead, the Zaldari's voice had been rough, but there was no malice in it. You may have won this round, human. But this isn't over. And yet, for all the anger Gorrak had shown, there had been something else in his eyes. Something Kaelan hadn't seen before, recognition. Gorrak had seen humanity's strength, not as an inconvenience, but as something worth acknowledging. For the first time, Gorrak had seen Kaelan, not just a human soldier but an individual with a purpose, a reason to fight beyond survival. Hours later, Kaelan found himself in the ship's main hall, walking toward the mess hall for a quick meal. He didn't expect the usual bustle of the crew, but the atmosphere was different. People were talking, but not the usual chatter. This time, it was quieter. The humans seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for something. Captain Voss, one of the Zaldari soldiers, called from across the hall, a low murmur rippling through the room. Kaelan turned to face him, surprised. "Yes?" Kaelan asked, his voice cautious. The Zaldari soldier, an officer with gray, battle-worn skin, approached with slow steps, the others in the room watching closely. "I wanted to say congratulations. Gorrak was wrong about you." His voice was steady, no hint of mockery. Kaelan frowned, trying to process the words. "Thanks," he replied simply. "But why tell me this now?" The officer gave a short nod, acknowledging Kaelan's confusion. "I was one of the ones who doubted you. We all thought humans wouldn't last long here, too young, too fragile. But yesterday, you proved us wrong. You showed us all what you're made of." Kaelan's gaze softened. It wasn't the kind of victory that felt earned by killing or dominating, it was the kind of respect that came only from proving someone's misconceptions wrong. And it was a hard-earned kind of respect. As the Zaldari officer walked away, Kaelan noticed the shift in the room. The other soldiers, who had been whispering behind his back, were now quiet. The human crew in the corner, too, was watching, some with awe, some with uncertainty, but all with a sense of recognition. They didn't need to say anything. Kaelan had already made his point. Later that evening, Kaelan stood at the same observation deck, looking out at the stars. The galaxy seemed as cold as it had before, but something had changed within him. He wasn't just the human soldier trying to prove himself anymore. He had realized that his journey wasn't about winning against individual enemies or proving his worth to any one race. It was about humanity, as a whole, finding its place in the universe. As the stars shimmered in the vast expanse, Kaelan's reflection on the glass was clear, but the weight he had carried for so long, of human insignificance, of being underestimated, felt lighter. Maybe there was more to their strength than just surviving. Maybe humanity's true power lay in something deeper, something that went beyond physical might. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, Kaelan felt ready for whatever came next. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You look like you've figured something out," Rhea said, stepping up beside him. Kaelan looked at her and smiled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I have."